Let's step back for a moment and look honestly at what is happening in the Middle East right now. When emotions run high and headlines move fast, it becomes very easy to lose sight of reality. And the reality is this. The United States has entered a war with Iran that has no clear strategy, no achievable end state, and potentially catastrophic consequences for the global economy. This didn't happen overnight. The path to this moment has been building for months. But now that the conflict has begun, we are confronted with a simple question that no one in Washington seems willing to answer. What exactly is the plan? Because from where I sit, there isn't one. The illusion of air power. Right now, the United States and its allies appear to believe that a sustained air campaign can force Iran to submit. But history tells us something very different. Since the end of World War II, bombing alone has never forced a major nation to surrender. Not in Korea, not in Vietnam, not in Iraq, not in Afghanistan. Air power can damage infrastructure. It can disrupt supply chains. It can degrade military capability. But it does not break the will of a nation, especially a nation the size of Iran. Iran is not a small state. It is a country of more than 90 million people, roughly the size of Western Europe. And its leadership has spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. So the idea that we can simply bomb Iran into submission is not strategy. It is wishful thinking. Iran's capabilities are being underestimated. Another dangerous assumption circulating in Washington is that Iran's military capabilities are limited. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Iran possesses a vast missile arsenal, much of it still hidden underground. Many of these missiles travel at speeds approaching 4,000 miles per hour. They are difficult to intercept, difficult to track, and increasingly precise. At the same time, Iran has developed long-range drones capable of traveling more than 1,000 miles. Some estimates suggest Iran possesses thousands of these systems, with production continuing. Meanwhile, the United States has a limited number of interceptor missiles deployed in the region. That means every missile Iran launches forces the United States and its allies into a defensive posture. And over time, that imbalance becomes extremely dangerous, because eventually, the numbers begin to favor the side with the larger arsenal. The Strait of Hormuz, the global economy's lifeline, but the military dimension is only part of the story. The real danger may lie in the global economy. The Persian Gulf is not just another region of the world. It is one of the most important energy corridors on the planet. Through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime passage, flows a massive share of the world's oil supply. Countries like Japan and South Korea depend on that corridor for 60 to 70% of their energy imports. India relies on it heavily. Even China receives a large portion of its oil through that route. Now imagine what happens if that shipping traffic stops. Oil prices skyrocket. Supply chains collapse. Energy markets spiral into chaos. And suddenly the world is not just facing a regional war. It is facing the very real possibility of a global recession. Russia and China are watching. There is another dimension to this conflict that Washington appears to underestimate. Russia and China are watching very carefully. Neither country wants to see the destruction of the Iranian state. Iran is a strategic partner for both. For China, Iran is an essential part of its long-term energy security. For Russia, Iran plays an important role in balancing Western power across Eurasia. So if the United States attempts to destroy Iran's military capability or destabilize its government, Moscow and Beijing will not simply stand by. They may not intervene directly, but they can provide intelligence. They can provide technology. They can provide weapons. And that would transform this war from a regional conflict into something much larger. The end of American dominance in the Gulf? There is also a deeper strategic question emerging from this crisis. For decades, the United States has been the dominant military power in the Persian Gulf. American naval forces have guaranteed the security of shipping lanes. American air power has deterred regional threats. But that model only works if allies believe the United States can actually protect them. And right now, that confidence is eroding. If Gulf states begin to believe that American forces cannot defend them from missile attacks, drones, or regional escalation, they will begin looking for alternatives. And that could mean a future in which the United States is no longer the primary security guarantor in the region. In other words, this war may not strengthen American influence. It may end it. The risk of escalation. There's another risk that is rarely discussed publicly. Escalation. Right now, Iranian missiles are striking targets across the region. Israeli defenses are under enormous pressure. American forces are being forced to reposition further away from the battlefield. The longer this conflict continues, the greater the danger that someone makes a decision that cannot be reversed. And one of the darkest possibilities is that Israel, facing overwhelming missile attacks, could consider the use of nuclear weapons to end the conflict. No one wants that outcome. But wars have a way of moving in directions no one originally intended. The strategic reality. At the end of the day, the strategic equation is very simple. Iran does not need to win this war. Iran only needs to survive. The United States, on the other hand, has set objectives that are far more ambitious. Destroy Iran's military capability, cripple its infrastructure, force its government to capitulate. Those are enormous goals. And history tells us that achieving them would require far more than an air campaign. It would require a massive ground invasion. And in today's world, where satellites track every movement and missiles can strike thousands of miles away, that kind of operation would be extraordinarily dangerous. The world is already feeling the shock. Meanwhile, the economic shock waves are spreading. Energy markets are reacting. Supply chains are tightening. Countries across Asia and Europe are beginning to ask a simple question. How long can this war continue? Because the longer it lasts, the greater the pressure on the global economy. And eventually the rest of the world may demand that the United States step back from the conflict entirely. Final thoughts. Wars often begin with confidence. Leaders believe victory will be quick. They believe technology will deliver decisive advantages. They believe their opponents will collapse under pressure. But reality has a way of intervening. And right now, the reality is that this conflict is far more complex and far more dangerous than many policymakers appear willing to admit. The question now is not whether this war will reshape the Middle East. It already has. The real question is whether it will reshape the global balance of power as well. Because once a conflict like this begins, controlling its outcome becomes far more difficult than starting it. And that is the moment the world may be entering now.